So in December of last year, after I had already filmed the last episode of the show, Bernie Sanders appeared on CNN for an interview with Jake Tapper, and I wanted to actually talk about this interview because he issued a warning to Republicans that I think is really important. He basically told them that if he were them, they should start worrying right now about the midterm elections that will be occurring at the end of this year, because after they passed that ridiculous tax bill that just was a brazen giveaway to the rich, not only should they be ashamed, but they should be worried that they will all lose their jobs. Now, the thing about this interview is that Bernie Sanders not only made this warning, but he also talked about a lot of the misconceptions that some Americans have about this tax bill, in large part due to the media's inaccurate reporting. And there's an example of it in this very interview, because Jake Tapper, as you'll see, he framed the questions about this bill in a really misleading way, because I don't even know if he realizes that he is painting a narrative about this tax bill that benefits Republicans and makes it seem as though it's better than it really is. So in this first clip I'm going to show you, Bernie Sanders explains exactly why this tax bill is in fact a scam.
According to the Tax Policy Center, next year 91% of middle-income Americans will receive a tax cut. Isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, it is a very good thing, and that's why we should have made the tax breaks for the middle class permanent. But what the Republicans did is made the tax breaks for corporations permanent, the tax breaks for the middle class temporary, and according to the Tax Policy Center, that same organization, at the end of 10 years, 83% of the benefits go to the top 1%, 60% of the benefits go to the top 1/10 of 1%. Meanwhile, at the end of 10 years, well over 80 million Americans will be paying more in taxes. 13 million Americans, as a result of this legislation, are going to lose their health insurance. Healthcare premiums are going up. We got a $1.4 trillion deficit as a result of this bill. And Paul Ryan is going around saying, oh, we have to offset that deficit by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. To answer your questions, should we have focused on the needs of the middle class? We should have. But the bulk of the benefits in this legislation go to large, profitable corporations and to millionaires and billionaires.
Okay, so when I watched that, I have no problem with what Bernie Sanders said. However, since Bernie Sanders is too polite to call out Jake Tapper for a really misleading way of framing that question, then I have to do it. So he said here that 91% of middle-income Americans will receive a tax cut. Now, this is a misleading statistic to cite because while it may be technically true, Jake Tapper is framing this bill as a predominantly middle-class tax cut bill, when that's factually incorrect. And if you actually go to the study he cites from Tax Policy Center, they state we find the bill would reduce taxes on average for all income groups in both 2018 and 2025. In general, higher income households receive larger average tax cuts as a percentage of after-tax income, with the largest cuts as a share of income going to taxpayers in the 95th to 99th percentile of the income distribution. On average, in 2027, taxes would change little for lower and middle income groups and decrease for higher income groups. Compared to current law, 5% of taxpayers would pay more tax in 2018, 9% in 2025, and 53% in 2027. So, if you look at this bill from a long-term perspective, which we should because it's a tax bill, this is not a tax cut for the middle class bill, and to frame it as that is just incredibly misleading. And the way that this bill is structured is just flawed. I mean, the richer you are, the bigger the tax cut you'll receive. And when 60% of Americans don't even have $500 in savings, well, the bill should be structured the opposite way. It shouldn't be that if you make more money, the government takes less money. It should be that if you make less money, the government takes less money. Because if you're richer, then you don't need that money as much as poor people do. It's a bill that disproportionately benefits the rich. And a lot of these congressmen and women that voted on it knowing that they are going to personally enrich themselves. So to suggest that this is a bill that benefits the middle class, it made me really angry. Jake Tapper knows better. He's one of the smarter pundits at CNN. So he should know to not frame it in a way that is incredibly disingenuous, but he did it anyway. And in fact, he went on to cite another misleading statistic about this tax bill.
Well, let's talk about the corporate tax cut, because in the hours after the bill passed, Major corporations such as AT&T and Comcast promised $1,000 bonuses for their workers, while companies like Wells Fargo and Fifth Third Bancorp hike their company-wide minimum wages to $15 an hour. And Republicans say this is evidence that the tax cut is working, not just for corporations, but for their employees.
Well, there are other corporations, by the way, who are involved now in corporate buybacks, where dividends are going to go up for the CEOs of the largest corporations. Nobody denies that we have right now a tax system in which 1 out of 5 major profitable corporations pay 0 in taxes. This legislation makes a bad situation worse, and it drives up the deficit. Many large corporations are going to use their tax breaks to make CEOs wealthier and do very little for workers.
So again, Jake Tapper is not giving you the full story here, and I think that Bernie Sanders could have done a better job explaining what really happened with AT&T and their workers, but I don't know if he's aware of the details because it's a pretty shady story. And AT&T, I mean, this is nothing more than corporate PR and spin. So they didn't give bonuses to workers because of this tax bill. They gave bonuses to workers because some employees of AT&T that were being represented by a union, specifically Communications Workers of America, well, that union put pressure on the company to permanently raise wages of workers, but since AT&T was greedy, they actually pushed for a one-time bonus instead. And as the union states, the $1,000 bonus was a drop in the bucket compared to what was promised. And trust me, if you're a poor or middle income earner, then $1,000 might seem nice, but it's not as nice as having a permanent wage increase. So what AT&T did here was really sneaky and pretty clever, admittedly, because they got people to think that they were doing this for altruistic reasons. Now, look, it is true that as a result of this bill, at least at face value, companies like Comcast and Boeing actually did give workers bonuses, and then they bragged about it. But they're not doing this for altruistic reasons. They're not doing this because they care about their employees. They're doing this to prove a point and to prove us wrong and to say, see, when we get tax cuts, we give our workers more money, when in actuality, the lion's share of the money that they'll be raking in as a result of these tax cuts will go to their pockets. So they'll give that money back to shareholders. That's what they're going to do. But when you look at this in the long term, that $1,000 bonus is not going to be reoccurring because of this tax bill. Again, this will just exacerbate income and wealth inequality, and these companies are being incredibly disingenuous. But I want to play another clip from this interview that I took issue with.
Another provision of this bill that was very interesting had to do with the elimination, the repealing of the individual mandate in Obamacare requiring individuals to buy health insurance. Take a listen to what President Trump had to say about this.
Obamacare has been repealed in this bill. We didn't want to bring it up. I told people specifically, be quiet with the fake news media because I don't want them talking too much about it, because I didn't know how people would. But now that it's approved, I can say the individual mandate on health care where you had to pay not to have insurance. Okay, think of that one. You pay not to have insurance. The individual mandate has been repealed.
Your response?
That a president celebrates the fact that 13 million Americans will lose their health insurance.
Well, willingly. They will.
Yeah.
They will.
Jake, we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. As a result of the repeal of the individual mandate, 13 million people will lose their health insurance. Now, some of these young people who are healthy today, you know what? They can get hit by a bus tomorrow. They could be diagnosed with leukemia the next day. Who do you think is now going to pay the bill as a result of the repeal of the individual mandate? You are, I am, and every American who has health insurance. Instead of bragging about more Americans without health insurance, we should join every other major country on earth, guarantee health care to all people, and end the absurdity of paying twice as much per capita for health care as any other major nation.
So it is true that as a result of Republicans repealing the individual mandate, a lot of Americans will just willingly give up health insurance. And yeah, that's still a problem because we do want people to have health insurance so that way they're not screwed when they get a medical emergency. But what Jake Tapper, again, is not pointing out is that this will also lead to a lot of people unwillingly losing medical insurance, because if you repeal the individual mandate, this will facilitate a 10% rise in health insurance premiums overall. And if people can't afford that 10% increase, then guess what's going to happen? They're going to unwillingly lose their health insurance, because the reason why the individual mandate was important in our broken healthcare system is because it required everyone to have health insurance. So that way, if someone didn't have health insurance and they had a medical emergency and they couldn't pay for that, then the cost wouldn't be passed on to everyone. This basically stops the cost of healthcare bills from being passed on to everyone else who has healthcare, in theory at least. So, I mean, a repeal of the individual mandate overall is negative. I mean, I don't agree with the individual mandate in principle. I think we should just have Medicare for all so nobody has to worry about health insurance. So really, I expected a lot better from Jake Tapper, who again is, I think, one of the better pundits at CNN, and maybe he was just playing devil's advocate in this interview or trying to be extra neutral for some reason, but the fact of the matter is that this bill has little more than a 30% approval rating. People know it's a scam. You don't have to pretend to be neutral here, Jake. You could just tell it like it is. And Bernie's responses to each of these questions overall was agreeable, I think, but I want to get to the most important point of this interview, where he talks about the backlash Republicans will inevitably see at the end of the year.
What you're seeing all across this country, are people catching on to the fact that Donald Trump ran for president saying that he was going to defend the interests of the working class and middle class, and it turned out he lied. You have a president who told us that he was going to provide health care to everybody. Then he proposed 30 million people being thrown off of health insurance. His tax plan was going to benefit the middle class. The bulk of the benefits go to the rich and large corporations. He was going to take on the drug companies, and then he appoints the guy to head the Health and Human Services Agency who comes from the drug companies, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what you're seeing is a referendum on Donald Trump about a man who said one thing during the campaign and his actions are very, very different. He wanted to drain the swamp. Well, it looks like the swamp now has more billionaires in his administration than any president in American history. So I think what we're seeing in Alabama, what we're seeing in Virginia, New Jersey, and in states all across this country are large voter turnouts, where people standing up and fighting back and demanding that we have a government that represents all of us, not just the 1%. If I were the Republicans, I would worry very much about 2018. And what I'm going to be doing is doing everything that I can to rally working people and young people to develop policies that protect workers and the middle class, not just corporations and billionaires.
I think Bernie Sanders is right here. People are going to quickly see that this bill will in fact exacerbate income and wealth inequality, and it also demonstrates that Republicans don't give a damn about you and I. They only care about themselves and their rich friends, hence why as soon as Donald Trump got to Mar-a-Lago on Christmas vacation after this bill was signed into law, he told all of his rich friends, congratulations, you just got a lot richer. So they are throwing around their wealth in our faces, and they don't give a damn. And this is what Republicans do. Trump and the Republicans aren't doing anything different than the party has always done. I mean, Reagan got in, cut taxes for the rich. Bush got in, cut taxes for the rich. Hell, even Obama made them permanent. And now Trump is doing the same thing. Republicans are doing what Republicans always do. They get in office, and they don't give a fuck about you and I. They just get in there to make the rich richer because, surprise, surprise, they're rich. So they care about themselves. So I think this will backfire, and I hope it backfires, and I hope that the American people realize that what the GOP did was rob them. It took money out of their pockets in order to pay for tax cuts for the rich, and they're not done robbing you just yet, because this year they will pursue what they call entitlement reform, and they're going to try to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. But these aren't entitlements. We pay for these with our tax dollars. So you don't have a right to get in there and take it away from us. Social Security, I mean, this comes out of our paychecks. You're basically saving money for us. That's not your money to touch, but they're going to do it anyway because that is a cookie jar that their rich friends have been wanting to rob for decades. So this is what Republicans are all about, and Bernie Sanders is issuing a warning to them that they really should take seriously.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.